Now, when you think of the biggest life lessons you might have learned in your life, you might think about things you learned from your parents, a teacher, maybe a job, but how about from your favorite restaurant? Well, that's the case of my guest today on Entre Nous, Curtis Chin. Curtis, welcome.
So excited to be here. Thank you.
So you are the author of the book, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. It's a memoir. You're in the midst of a big book tour right now, all through Europe. You've got a stop tonight in Paris, at Columbia in Paris. You've got a book signing tomorrow in Boulogne-Billancourt. So thanks for taking the time to come in. It's a busy schedule. But first, set the scene for us. So what is this Chinese restaurant?
Well, it's not just any Chinese restaurant. I like to think of it as the Chinese restaurant in Detroit. And the way I sort of gauge that is we sold over 10 million egg rolls during my childhood, throughout the history. So it was just a really, really wonderful place. The whole city came in, everybody from the mayor to the pimps and prostitutes on the street corner. And I just learned so much about life.
And what's so incredible about it is this is a restaurant that was founded by your great-grandfather, correct? In
Exactly.
1940. What was their story? What was it like when they first came to Detroit?
Well, they first actually arrived to America in the late 1800s. And I tell this joke that they moved from Canton, China to Canton, Ohio, before realizing there weren't any Chinese people there. And then they moved up to Detroit, which at the time, the auto industry was just starting. He tried to get a job in the auto factory, but, there's a lot of discrimination back then. And so he did the only job he could, which was hand laundry. And he fortunately saved up enough money and opened up his own laundry and then eventually a grocery store and then this restaurant in 1940.
Indeed, and the restaurant where, of course, you spent almost all of your childhood, something like 80 hours a week, you said your family spent in this restaurant?
Well, I mean, during the summers, right?
Yeah.
We'd be there 7 days a week, open to close. And for me, growing up now, I jokingly say that 40 hours is a part-time job for me,
And so the restaurant was in Detroit, not perhaps the best neighborhood of Detroit, kind of a rough neighborhood. What was that like growing up in Detroit in the 80s in that restaurant, which you've described as kind of a refuge for people there and for yourself?
Yeah, well, when I tell people I grew up in Detroit, they say, which part? And I say, the bad part. And they're like, what? There's actually a bad part? So yeah, the area was known as the Cass Corridor. It actually had the highest crime rate per stats, And it was hard in that sense because just a few blocks away, you'd hear about, buildings being burnt down or people being shot, And despite that, though, we had this one little block, which is known as Chinatown, when it was really just like 6 restaurants. But I felt really safe and secure there because, my family was there, my parents, my cousins, my siblings. And I just felt like I had the best childhood, despite the fact that there was crack cocaine, there was AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18 years old. But I just felt like my parents did the best they could and equipped me and my 5 siblings with everything we needed.
Right. So what exactly did they encourage you to do? I mean, go talk to the customers, or what was the advice?
Yeah, so given the title of the book, what did I learn in a Chinese restaurant? I like to say that the first thing I learned was something from my dad. When you're a kid, oftentimes your parents will say, don't talk to strangers. My dad gave me the exact opposite advice. He was like, talk to strangers. And who he was talking about were the people sitting in the dining room. Because, my dad was a kid from Chinatown. He never left, never went off to college. But at the same time, he could talk to anybody that came into our restaurant and have a really great conversation. And I think that's something he taught us. And so anytime he met somebody who had a cool job or just seemed really happy, he'd call all 6 of us kids to run over and barrage them with questions of, what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money do you make? And just this idea of talking to people who are different from you and not being afraid to ask questions and not being afraid to ask for help are lessons that really have guided me throughout my life.
And you touched on this briefly, talking about your great-grandfather who founded the restaurant. And I know the pitch of the book is come for the egg rolls, stay for the talk on racism. So I mean, it's a serious subject that you tell in a charming and light manner, but it still is a very serious subject. What were the biggest racist stereotypes that your family faced and even you faced growing up?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously writing the book was important to me, particularly with what's going on in the United States right now. We have a lot of division. We don't talk to each other. We have these little silos. But Chinese restaurants are actually one of the few places where you can go in and see somebody from a different race, socioeconomic background, religion. And I wanted to take that opportunity to sort of, maybe bring people together a little bit. Like these baby steps that our country really needs to take. And I would like to see that happen. And if Chinese restaurants are the places that it needs to happen, then so be it. Chinese restaurants to the rescue. Let us save America. In terms of the stereotypes, I mean, I say it's interesting that the stereotypes that my great-great-grandfather faced when he came to the United States in the 1800s, probably the same stereotypes that I face now, right? This idea that you're a foreigner, that you're not fully being able to integrate into American society. During COVID, a lot of those stereotypes were that you were dirty, disease-ridden. So it's not that different, right? The stereotypes of Asians in the United States have really persisted.
Has anything changed over the years, would you say?
I think what's changed is the response, right? Because there are larger numbers of Asian Americans and a more unified network, I would say, a community. When I compare it to it, it's like, for instance, we have community-based organizations, right, who are helping people, fight back against these things. We have politicians, who are enacting laws. We have celebrities who are speaking out when something bad happens. Like, for instance, during COVID, there was this rise of anti-Asian hate, right, which led to a Stop AAPI Hate movement in the United States. Mm-hmm. We were, as a community, much better equipped to sort of respond to these attacks. And so I think that's the change, right? It's like, how can we as a community make sure that our rights are equal in the United States?
And now you're currently doing this big book tour all throughout Europe, some 21 dates this whole month of May in many different countries, tonight in Paris, moving on to the UK. Do you notice that people talk to you about things differently than perhaps they might talk to you in the United States?
So the book has been out for about a year and a half, and I literally have gone to over 300 places, everywhere from Korea to Germany. You're right. This particular leg of my trip is 21 more events, including Oxford University and the British Library. So it's been really wonderful. I will have to say that in the last 6 months, the tone has changed a bit, partly because we had an election. Like when I was first going out, a lot of the questions were just about my family and Detroit, and a lot of questions about Chinese food, right? But now, particularly here in Europe, because I've been here for about a week and a half now, some of these questions are more of concern about what is the direction of the United States, what is this friendship, how does it stand between these two parts of the world, right? Which has been so enduring for so many decades. So I think that's it. And I think one of my message that I like to give now that I'm traveling around here is that, have faith in the United States. We're not a perfect country, but we try our best. And, we're going through a rough patch right now. But hopefully, cooler, calmer heads will prevail in the future, and that there are people in the United States who do care about these issues of creating a more multicultural society where people can live together and have a better understanding of each other.
Well, thank you so much for your book and for trying to help that message move it along a little bit more. The book is called Everything I Learned. I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, written by Curtis Chin, our guest on Entre Nous today. Thank you so much for coming in. You do have your lecture tonight at Columbia in Paris.
At Columbia at 7 o'clock.
And a book signing tomorrow.
At 7 o'clock at Les Mots et les Choses.
In Boulogne-Billancourt.
That's my fourth grade, that's my high school French.
It's pretty good.
The best I can do.
Curtis, thank you so much. And don't forget, if you want to rewatch this interview or check out any of our Entre Nous interviews, you can do that on our website, france24.com.